Welcome back to Raw and Unfiltered. I'm Chris, and today we're going to start a series that's kind of an addendum to the Quantum versus Faith series we did earlier. If you haven't watched that, please go back and do. There is so much rich stuff in there that's going to be the building blocks for everything we're going to do from here on out. Now, I will give you a 10-second overview in case you haven't, but the concept is that the quantum realm is where God began creation. In the Hebrew text, it says that the Spirit of the Lord hovered over the deep. And that word hovered is a terrible translation. In the Hebrew, it actually means he vibrated over the deep. He brooded over the deep. Just like a bird sits on its eggs, minute vibrations are actually bringing that life into pass. Now, those vibrations of God actually created our quantum fields and birthed the photon and the electromagnetic forces, as we're going to discuss in more detail here. Now, we discussed the photons earlier as the very building blocks of life, okay, along with the quantum particles birthing atoms. But the next part is the most fascinating, and we're going to get in today to a little bit of quantum electrodynamics, QED. Now, I have subscribed to some of the principles, but not in the same way as many of the quantum experts. So let me just give a disclaimer to give you guys an idea here. This is going to be a little bit geeky, but it's important. In the quantum fields, an electron can emit a photon in order to change direction. And an electron and a positron can interact to produce a pair of photons. So in QED, matter can become energy, and energy can become matter. Confused yet? This is crazy stuff. Now let me pause for a moment there and talk about one core thing as a basic principle of science. A moving electric field creates a magnetic field, and a moving magnetic field also creates an electrical field. The two are completely interlinked. But not only are they interlinked, they're interlinked with quantum particles, in particular photons. Now, as we discussed in the last video, how photons are a part of the basis for when God said, "Let there be light." Okay? As he was brooding over the water and he created this and he said, brooding over the deep, right? He said, "Let there be light." It wasn't the sun. The sun wasn't created. No. God was actually lighting the oscillators of the universe, the electromagnetic fields, the photons, and the quantum fields to all come together in order with each other to carry out the light waves that eventually the sun, the stars, and the moon would all be emanating, okay? Now, first the unseen, the quantum, then the seen. As a side note, there are quantum rings and electromagnetic fields that are oscillators. That is science. There's scientific papers on this stuff. I mean, it's just incredible. The problem we have today in science is so separated from faith. And you can only understand God's creation when you combine the two of it. Now listen, I'm not a physicist. I'm not a schooled scientist at all. I'm just a passionate learner that loves to get out there and dig up the truth. But you know what? Many of our greatest discoveries have come from ordinary men and women just like you and me, who are just curious about the universe and want to understand. Curiosity is a gift when we use it the right way. So all of this is important as we begin to discuss the God of thunder, and that's the theme of this series. And do you know that this term is, I'm going to just get into this a little bit, and then we're going to come back to what we just talked about in the quantum realm. I'm going to break it down and make a little more sense for you. Did you know that the term, the God of thunder, is the number one deity across history and cultures? You know that there are some 600 plus references in Wikipedia for the God of thunder. Why is that? Well, I'm going to tell you something. There's a good reason. Lightning is a mysterious and, for much of history, an out-of-reach display of grandiose raw power that was not possible by human effort. And that's a really important point. Now, if you stop to think about it, electrical phenomena was scary stuff and potentially deadly. But I have this picture in my head of Nikola Tesla sitting in a pod, and he's got electricity bolts flying in every direction, seeming to be right in the middle of lightning. And I think if there's ever a picture of our generation, that's the picture that is in my head. We seem to have harnessed and tamed the ultimate thing that so many cultures thought was completely impossible and out of reach. But you see, etched deep and the whole fabric of creation and all around us is this quantum realm. And now we're being humbled. I'm just telling you the facts. What we're learning from the quantum scientists and physicists is they're going to tell you this. They're going to say, you know what? The more we learn, the less we know. It's a mysterious realm. I want you to get a picture of something powerful. And then these things are going to begin to make more sense as we dive more deep into this. The God of thunder appeared on the mountain with Moses. Remember, the Israelites were standing there with such tremendous electrical force that it produced an enormous lightning storm and thunder so strong that it actually shook the mountain. And, the Israelites were terrified, and they're like, we're gonna die. I mean, that's how terrifying it was. It was absolutely terrifying. And he led the Israelites out. Sometime later, he did so with a very powerful electric force. Now, one of the things you need to understand is that in ancient literature and grammar, there were not different words for electricity because it wasn't a thing. Lightning was the only thing that they had, and fire. Lightning and fire were completely interchangeable, and you'll find this as you begin to study ancient Hebrew, Greek, and even our own English language. We really didn't have much of a word for these things until a couple hundred years ago, because lightning produces fire. You see what I'm saying? It would always produce fire when it hit something, right? It set a tree on fire, set the grass on fire. So there was an interchangeable of these words. So we get to this curious story of Elijah on the mountain. And here he is, and the prophets of Baal are crying out. What are they crying out to? Did you know that the god of Baal was actually represented by a lightning bolt? There were a few things that he was represented by, but that was one of the core things, was a lightning bolt. He was one of the god of thunders, the false one, of course. And that's what Elijah was trying to get at. So when Elijah calls down fire from heaven, that word fire is wrongly translated. It should be lightning. He called down lightning from heaven. And boy, oh boy, did he ever. The biggest lightning bolt there probably ever was. And he set that whole thing on fire, and they were terrified, and they realized who the real God of thunder actually is. Such a powerful force, such an amazing thing. I want to tell you that, in fact, throughout most of the Judeo-Christian literature, God displays in a very powerful lightning or electrical force. And we're going to dive really deep into all of this, but I wanted you to have some understanding of this realm. So we're going to do this more. So thanks for joining. I'm really excited to dive into more on this subject, and we're going to see some absolutely amazing stuff. I've been laying the foundation for us to get into a deeper realm. So come back, and we're going to do it on the next video.